Hello, and welcome to SLJ's Day of Dialogue. My name is Brandi Grant. I'm a former campus middle school librarian, and I currently serve as a librarian specialist for Plano ISD. Today's panel is titled Another Time, Another Place. We'll be diving into three powerful works of historical fiction where the setting is far more than just a backdrop, it's a catalyst. From the draft riot fires of the Civil War era in New York and the shifting social tides of post-World War II America to the isolated, myth-soaked mountains of the Appalachia, these stories transport us to a pivotal moments in our past. We are joined by three amazing authors whose protagonists find themselves at profound historical crossroads. Each character is confronted by events that permanently alter their world, forcing them to stop, look inward, and examine exactly what it is they believe in. Together, these authors explore what I like to call as the OMG moments, those that challenge beliefs and identity. Their characters are just navigating through a changing America. Hi, authors. Go ahead and turn on your cameras. I need for you all to introduce yourselves, give the title of your book, and a 60-second book talk about your current title. Because let's face it, that's how long that a librarian or an educator has to convince a kid to read it. So, Kirstie, go ahead and get us started.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kirstie Myvett, and my middle grade book, The Four Seasons of Florence, Wallace, will be released on May 26th next week. It is my first middle grade book, and it's a story about a girl who is sent to live at the Colored Orphan Asylum in New York during the Civil War. She spends a year there learning and growing and discovering a dream within her. There are many themes in this book, including friendship, family, grief, and courage, to name a few. And I'm really excited to be here and talk about this book with you all. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Hi, Jason.
Hey everybody, my name is Jason Douglas, and I'm coming to you live from my middle school classroom right here. Today, I want to tell you about my book, Jane American. It's a World War II coming-of-age tale. It takes place in historic Plymouth, Michigan, right outside of Detroit. And during the war years, Jane, our protagonist, is living a life of family, stability, and hope until she's not. Till the war brings tragedy to her front doorstep and changes her in unbelievable ways that are better left hidden. You can insert your metaphor here. Into the war comes, reality sets in. Dad's not coming home. Society is determined that mom can no longer be a Rosie the Riveter, and it leaves young Jane with a choice: stay safe, stay hidden, or embrace who she really is and what she can truly do for the sake of everybody that she loves. It's full of those universal, relatable themes about identity and self-worth and you being you in a world that tells you something different, but also a very personal story to me because it is named after and inspired by my late grandmother who went through all that 80 years ago. It comes out from Mad Cave Paper Cuts and Simon & Schuster on September 1st and is available for pre-order right now.
Thank you so much. And bringing us in, Jessica.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kasper Kramer. You are welcome to call me Jessica. I am the author of several historical middle grade novels with Simon & Schuster, The Story That Cannot Be Told, The List of Unspeakable Fears, and Eyes on the Sky. My upcoming book is Serpent on the Mountain, and it comes out next month on the 16th. This is set in 1975 rural Appalachia here in my home state of Tennessee, up a little farther north than me in East Tennessee. I'm down in Chattanooga. And it is about a young girl and her two sisters who live in a very isolated, poverty-stricken holler. And they encounter a snake-handling preacher who sets up a revival in the holler and challenges their beliefs and disrupts the life of their family.
And you heard her right, a snake handling preacher. You heard that. That was it. So thank you so much. Just a quick note to the audience that we will have time for Q&A a bit later. So if something sparks a question during our conversation, please feel free to drop it in the chat, and later on we'll see about getting some answers to your burning questions. So now for the reason why we are all here, let's talk to these authors because I have so many questions. Kirstie, Kirstie, sorry. You set the story of the Four Seasons of Florence Wallace against the backdrop of the New York draft riots. And there was a moment in the book, I'm not going to give it away, where the orphanage itself becomes a target. How do you balance the heartwarming elements of the story with friendship and hope and with the sheer dramatic stakes of a city that's basically in chaos?
Yeah, that was balancing, that was a bit challenging, but the friendships help to anchor the story. They give the reader something to care about, people to root for, with all of the chaos, that's happening outside in our country and in New York City then. But realistically, the children would have known very little of what was happening. They were secluded in the orphanage. It was a safe place for them, where they had a very structured routine and daily life. So those heartwarming elements, I felt like they were vital, and they would have truly been something that the children would have clung to while they lived there. But they certainly wouldn't have ever imagined the effects of the war, the effects of the draft, coming to their doorsteps.
And quickly, would you mind kind of giving us a little bit of a historical description of the New York draft riots? Because that's something in history that I never learned, and I went down the rabbit hole as I read your book.
Yeah, certainly. So during the draft, men were drafted, but one of the issues that came up was men who were wealthy could pay for a substitute. So they would give someone $300 who would go and serve in their place. So on the first day of the draft, it was a lot of poor men, a lot of immigrants that were chosen to go and fight this war that was taking place in the South. And of course, they didn't understand why they had to go, why were the rich men exempt. And these tempers just started brewing. It had really started long before then, though. The media kind of fanned the flames of uh, if all the people, if all the enslaved people are freed, they're going to come up here up north and they're going to take our jobs. So it was just this fanning of the flames that had been going on for months and months. So by the time the draft actually happens, it's just a perfect storm for things to explode. So yes, that pretty much sums it up.
Thank you so much for that. Jason, you mentioned in your introduction that you have this deep personal connection to the book. You named it Jane after your late grandmother, and you took inspiration from her life. Could you share a little more about how your own family history helped to shape Jane's journey, and what was the important truth about your grandmother's struggles you wanted to capture in this character?
Um, so she was my inspiration because she was literally in her life. She's a little bit older in the world than Jane is in the book, but she was a switchboard operator during the war when my grandfather was overseas, and it was one of those jobs that was no longer there when everybody came home. And when I was younger, it wasn't something she talked about, but I did get some time towards the end of her life where I was interviewing her and I was interviewing my grandfather because I'm a history nerd at heart and I just want that family history there. There was no idea for a book, but like she had regrets about that. She never regretted having my mom and her two sisters. She never regretted the life that she led, but she regretted the life that possibly she could have had. And what I realized when this story was was brimming and brewing, and I was putting it onto the page, a comic book script page, that like this is not just her story; it's so many people's stories, right? It, it's it's women who got a taste of what they should have had. It's people of color who got a taste of what they should have had. It's honestly the end of World War II, like for a history nerd and me, you can connect the dots and see that the civil rights movement is born post World War II, not 10 years later. That women's equal rights movements is born obviously a century earlier, but also right after World War II, because as soon as you rely on people and expect them to do things to keep things together and then take it back away again, you've already opened the door. And she kind of in not in so many words made that clear. And so, you know, Kirstie said it right, like balance, right? Finding the balance between your narrative, the fictional narrative, the historical truth of it, and whatever emotional connection you have to it too, is like one of the great tricks of writing a good story, I think.
And then I think about on top of that, you've put it in a comic book graphic format, which is such a great idea, especially for this type of history. And I mean, that format, it's going to reach a lot of students, a lot of kids.
Absolutely. It's like one of the great passions of mine. When I taught elementary school for the first 13 years of my career, I think maybe my greatest victory as an educator was actually bringing comics into the classroom for my reluctant readers and my below grade level readers because I had that blissful ignorance and irrational confidence of like a 22 to 24-year-old educator where you think you can solve all the problems of the world and there's nothing that you can't do. And I started banging my head against this wall of those reluctant readers and below grade level readers because we would have everybody probably remembers this. We'd have like our silent reading time. We called it Dear, drop everything and read. And you look at this kid who was multiple grade levels below where they should be, and they'd rather read a 500-page prose novel upside down and backwards than admit the stigma of being behind. And kids know comics are cool, and you put them in their hand and you put it at an appropriate grade level, and the stigma's gone. And magic is not a word that I use in education or in science, but it was the closest I've ever seen to magic in my life. And this has just been a dream come true to actually now, this is a comic that I produced and I made and will be in schools and libraries across the country that hopefully makes that same kind of difference that those other books made in my kids' lives for so many years.
I'm sure it will. Jessica, I think with your book, I was just fascinated by the setting because it's just totally different than what I've ever experienced. I had to really like educate myself on that area of the United States. So the setting in your book is just like it's just so much more than a location. It feels like another character. Because there is this surprising history of life on the Eastern Front or the deep hollows of the Appalachia. So, how did researching the landscape influence your book, but then the darker, more impactful moments of your plot?
So, I definitely had spent a lot of time, a lot of the inspiration for this book just came from the fact that I live here in Southern Appalachia, and I love these mountains. My his like family background is actually in Northern Appalachia too. So I've just kind of I'm deeply connected to these mountains here, and they are incredible mountains. They are not the biggest, they are not the shiniest, but they are ancient. They are literally older than trees. So trees are about 350 million years old, and the Appalachian Mountains are about half a billion years old. So they're literally older than trees, and they are dark and dense, and immigrants from all over the world came here to southern Appalachia and settled in these mountains. And they brought with them their stories, they brought with them their traditions. And I knew I always wanted to write a book. It probably won't be the only book in my lifetime I write that is set here because I'm so drawn to these mountains. Um, the biggest thing with research for this novel for me was probably the snake handlers, though, the evangelical snake handlers, because I have kind of a bit of a personal connection to them too. And I was really fortunate. I took a course in undergrad called Religion in America back 10,000 years ago. And um, during that course, I discovered the snake handlers, which have roots here not only in southern Appalachia, but specifically near my home here in Chattanooga. Um, and I became just absolutely fascinated with them during that time. I wrote a short story, and over the years, it just kind of developed into a strong desire to write about these churches and what it was like to be in them. And I got fortunate again. It was just luck in my life that kept landing me near the snake handlers. But the school I went to graduate school at, the University of Tennessee, Chattanooga, has one of its professors is actually probably the world's foremost researcher on evangelical snake handlers. He's been visiting their churches and recording them since 1975 and has something like 400 hours of video and audio recordings, of which I viewed many. So a lot of that research just wound up in the book for me to try and create a world that was real and that had a serious emotional impact on the characters. And I think we need more Appalachia in books. I think we need to we a lot of our important US history is settled here. The Cold War specifically, I'm looking at a lot right now because they are incredibly relevant to the modern day. And I just like the setting here. I want to keep writing about it.
I think that's the like common thread between the three of your books. It is this deep rooted history, but just these topics that I'm experiencing and I'm learning so much more about. And I just think about in libraries, these would be the most amazing book talk books. These would be the books that as a librarian or as a teacher, I would hold up and I would give a little taste and these students would be like, no, what? And then chaos will ensue for them to get that book. And so that I'm so excited for them to be exposed to these histories that have been around for so long, but that they need to be talked about. They need to be shown. So I'm super excited. Kirstie, Florence is part of the Gutsy Girls series. She has guts. But when I was reading throughout the book, it seems like she doubts herself like everyone. In a world that tells her and us, you have to be fearless, you got to go get it. What do you think is the most gutsy but quiet choice Florence makes that will inspire other readers who struggle with self confidence or with their voice?
Yeah. I think the gutsy, quiet choice that Florence makes is when she finally accepts and embraces where she is. There's a shift in her mindset. In the beginning, she's quite opposed to being at the orphanage, but this quiet acceptance is showing that she's growing up, and she realizes there's many girls her age that they work. They actually have jobs. And so if there's even the slightest possibility that she can change her future and get to choose, she decides to take it. And she spends a lot of time quietly thinking and processing what it will mean for her and what it will mean for her family. So, and I think that would certainly inspire students who may be struggling with their own self-confidence.
Especially that reflection. It's always like reaction, reaction. You got to do it now. But just sometimes just sitting and thinking, that's the best. Jason,
Absolutely.
Um, we often celebrate Rosie the Riveter as a symbol of power, but your book explores the other aspect about that moment when society decided that Jane's mom couldn't be a Rosie anymore. So seeing the mom's strength sidelined, um, how did that influence Jane's journey? And what do you hope like that iconic Rosie Flex pose ultimately represents to your young readers, boy or girl, when they finish the book?
Yeah, it's a really good question. Like when you read the story, I mean, you literally the very first panel on the very first page is Jane making a decision on what she's going to wear to this job interview post-war, post-mom getting sent home. And her mom's sundress is there, and her mom's Rosie outfit is there. She makes a certain choice on day one, and she makes a very different choice later. It's literally her superhero costume. It's the embracing of your family, your heritage, what you're proud of, right? And carrying that on and finding strength in that, even as because you talked about with Kirstie about like characters having doubt. I mean, it's a young 15-year-old in a world that 15-year-old young girls don't have any power in 1946, and her embracing something that makes her proud, from her family history, and having that be part of her identity going forward is a big thing for her, and I think a big thing for any of our young people.
So true. So true. Jessica, in the story, the lines between myth and reality are blurred. What is a specific event or discovery that forces your protagonist to stop viewing the world through these lenses of childhood stories and start seeing a place where they need to take a stand?
So, Delilah in this story is a practitioner of hill magic, which is the traditional, it has a lot of names here in Appalachia. Some people call it granny magic. Some communities refer to it as root work. There are a lot of different names, but they're all these combinations of typically a Christian background, the use of a Bible, and healing is a big component of it. Delilah is very serious about her hill magic, but she has had no luck in actually making anything happen, and she's beginning to doubt it. And along with that, she is beginning to doubt all the other things in her life, all the folk tales she's heard, all here in the South, again, we have a lot of creatures. We've got the Tennessee wild man, and we've got river monsters, and we've got stories about giant cats in the woods. And Delilah is beginning to wonder if none of this is real. And of course, when the snake handling preacher becomes a part of her life too, she begins to question her religion as well. And there's a moment in the book where she's already beginning to feel doubts about things. There's a folk tale involved where she's feeling like she's magically bound to a rattlesnake that almost bites her in the opening chapters of the novel and is now being used in the church handling services. And she is dealing with feeling like maybe this is real, maybe it's not. That blur of reality is becoming a problem. And then there's a moment with her little sister, Jessie, who is absolutely just a presence of chaos. And they're looking for their lost pet raccoon, and Jessie is breaking down emotionally. And Delilah realizes that allowing Jessie to rely on some of these folk tales and myths about the animals in the forest that might eat Freddie, that might kill him, is actually harming Jessie and making the situation harder for both of them. And that's a moment where I think she starts to really feel like the things I'm really worried about are the things that are actually happening in front of me, that my raccoon is lost, that my family is struggling. And she's not quite as worried about the folklore things. I think it's actually the teaching moment for her little sister that sort of creates that line for her in the sand.
Yeah. Yeah. So we're going to go into a group question. So there's no rhyme or reason. Whoever feels moved, you may begin to answer the question. I want to go specifically
Brandi,
back.
before we do that, Brandi, I've got to interject because all of our librarians out there and all of our educators out there know exactly what just happened in the middle of that last question when 6th to 7th hour transition music kicked on right while I was trying to say something powerful. Because here with in a library and in a classroom with the kids, it's never going to go exactly as planned. So apologizing for all that insanity right while I was trying to answer about Jane. So there you go. That's school for you. That's young people.
That's okay, at least it wasn't a fire drill. You know, we're good. So group questions. I want to go back to the what I was talking about, like these lesser known narratives. So each of your books are centered around a pivotal era in American history: the Civil War, aftermath World War II, the Appalachian frontier. Um, and you all chose to focus on these unlooked corners of those eras, which I am obsessed. So, what drew you to these lesser known narratives? Um, and how do you want to help students understand the emotional cost of history in a way that a textbook could never do?
I'll answer that question. So I was drawn to this narrative by the sheer fact that it's a mostly unknown event in our history. It's hidden, as you said. Our history books, they typically focus on famous people, famous figures, politicians, presidents, etc. But I believe telling the stories of everyday people who lived, who loved, and who suffered loss is more relatable. Their humanity shines through the storytelling in a way that is often missing in a textbook. And I think it's ironic that we're getting ready to celebrate our 250th anniversary, America, next month. And so, or in July rather. And so shedding light on these lesser known narratives, the good, the bad, and the ugly, I think it's even more important in remembering and honoring our collective American history.
Um, so Kirstie, with the draft riots, I mean, I'm a Civil War nerd, and it's one of the most fascinating things. I personally think you just look at New York during those years and the draft riots specifically, and you can learn more about our country from that little snapshot than any dry history book that takes you from even like 1850 to 1865. Um, so I teach eighth grade English, but I bring a lot of history into the classroom. And a lot of it, I love that you said the hidden corners, Brandi, or the stuff that's swept under the rug. Before we came on this Zoom, we were all talking in here about there's a bunch of allusions in my book to an event that was literally swept under the rug in our country for 100 years, and that's the Tulsa massacre, the burning of Black Wall Street in 1921, and that there's actually a bunch of allusions to that in my book. In my class, we talk about the internment of Japanese Americans during World War II, something else that was kind of just denied as a piece, and it's like when I look at the curriculum that like the three teenagers that I've risen, the three humans that live in my house, where my eighth graders eventually go. And they stop. If they get to World War II in their history class, they stop. And they don't talk about what comes next. And in my opinion, as a history nerd, I think a lot of times it's the connective tissue that actually has the real stories and the real truth about where we get before you get to the textbook that has the great man theory nonsense that we've relied on for so long to be the driving force of who we are and who we were and who we're going to be. It's that connective tissue and it's that extra stuff that kind of gets swept aside that I think we almost learn more from than anything else.
I will add too that as a kid and as an adult, I'm not particularly drawn to stuff that I already know a lot about. I like to to write about things that I have to research. I'm a super nerd at heart. I went to school for way too long and and I love researching. And for me, finding a location, my first book was set during the revolution in Romania in 1989. I like to find places that I don't know a lot about and spend a lot of time really diving into them because what's most interesting to me is that usually it's in those unknown places where we find the biggest connections to what is going on right now today. I feel like you come up against a big wall when you try to tell not just kids, but adults, here's what's happening now and it's bad and here's why it's bad. People shut off, kids shut off, adults do. But if you can talk about something that already happened that was super important and taught us a lesson, and just retell that lesson. Retell the things that we learned in the past so that we don't repeat them, as the saying goes with history. That is where I feel like historical fiction and kidlit really shines.
I agree. Thank you all for your insight on that question. Um, Time flies when you're talking about great books and with great authors. I just want to be the first person to tell you all thank you so much for your gift that you have given the literary world. I know you guys are going to have huge success with these 3 titles, and I cannot wait when they get out so I can start passing them out to people. So thank you all so much for attending our panel. Another time, another place. We've traveled from the streets of 1860s New York to the post-war small towns of 1940s and to the deep into the mystery hollows of Appalachia. A huge thank you to our incredible authors, Kirstie, Jason, and Jessica, for sharing their time, their personal histories, and their deep insights into these gutsy protagonists. We also want to thank their publishers for their dedication to bringing these essential stories to libraries and classrooms everywhere. Audience, we appreciate you for being part of today's conversation. We hope you leave inspired and curious and ready to help your students uncover the powerful stories of the past as they navigate the challenges of their present. Up next is going to be the session's middle grade sampler and Down a Dark Road. So have a great rest of the time at SLJ's Day of Dialogue, and thank you authors so much.
Thank you.